Hi, I'm Aristotelis Pitaridis. In this video, we are going to use Web API 2 in order to automate the creation of the controller for data access in order to work with jQuery AJAX calls. Now that we understood what is AJAX and how it works, let's make a more complex example. We will create a model and we will manage its data with a controller, the way we already know, and after that we will edit the same data using AJAX calls. First of all, we are going to create our model. Our model is going to be a student. In order to create it, we right-click the Models folder and we select Add Class. As class name, we type Student and we click the Add button. First, we have the student ID, which will be the unique ID of the student, and it is going to be our primary key. After that, we are going to make two more properties, which will be the name and the surname of the student. Let's build the application so that the model will be recognized by Visual Studio in order to create the student's controller. Now, we right-click the Controllers folder and we select the Controller command from the Add submenu. We select the MVC5 controller with views using Entity Framework and we click the Add button. The Add Controller dialog box will appear on the screen. We select the Student Model class from the drop-down list. We create a new context class by clicking the button next to the Data Context class drop-down list. We leave the default context name and we click the Add button in order to create the context class. In order to complete the controller creation, we click the Add button. Let's execute the application in order to display the contents of the student's controller. We create two students so that we will have some data to work with. Now that we created the web management of the student model, let's start creating the AJAX management for the student model. In order to automatically create the server side of the AJAX, we are going to create a new API controller. We right-click the Controllers folder and we select the Controller command from the Add submenu. We select the Web API 2 controller with actions using Entity Framework and we click the Add button. The Add Controller dialog box will appear on the screen. We select the Student Model class from the drop-down list. We select the context class that we created previously from the Data Context class drop-down list. We also have to change the controller name. Because we already have created a student's controller, we are going to give the name Students API to our new controller. So we will type the name Students API controller in the controller name. In order to complete the controller creation, we click the Add button. Let's see what Visual Studio created for us. There is one member function for each action that we may need to execute using AJAX calls. We will see each of these actions and we will create the equivalent client-side AJAX call. Before we continue, let's see an image that we have added in the folder images of the root folder with the name loader.gif, which will be displayed during the AJAX call so that the visitor of the site will know that the website waits for a response from the server. Let's start by creating a student's action in the home controller. Now we right-click on the action and we select the Add View command, and we create the view by clicking the Add button. I will paste the code for the client-side AJAX under the title of the view. Let's explain the code that we pasted in our view. First of all, we have a form with 5 buttons, one for each of the basic functions of data management. We have the Get Students button, which returns all the students stored in the database. We have the Get Student button, which will return only the student who has a student ID equal to the student ID that the user typed next to the button. We will have the Add Student button, which will add a student in the database. We will have the Update Student button, which will update a student in the database. And finally, we will have the Delete Student, which will delete the student who has a student ID equal to the value that we used in the text box next to the button. Below, there is a JavaScript block which handles the click events for the buttons. At the bottom, we have a div which contains a loading image which will be displayed on the screen when we have an AJAX call, so that the user will not be able to do something while the application tries to access the data from the web. The div has been styled using CSS, which is located over the div. In a normal website, we never add CSS like this. We put it in a CSS file that we have included in our page, but for now we will leave it there so that we will have the whole example completed in one place. At the bottom of the JavaScript tag there are 2 events, the AJAX start and the AJAX stop. These events will help us to display the loading div when we start the AJAX call and hide it when the AJAX call has finished, by calling the jQuery show and hide methods. Let's take the JavaScript code from the beginning to explain how it works. The first click event that we can see is for the Get Students button. We can see that we use the getRequest type, and for the URL we have the API word which is used by Web API in order to define that this request is going to use the Web API routing instead of the default ASP.NET MVC routing. After the API, we have a slash and the name of the controller that we want to call. The rest is the same as we saw in the first AJAX example. In the success event, we have the data object which contains all the students that the server-side part of the AJAX call returned. Let's see the action which created this object, which is the getStudent action of the Students API controller. As we can see, it asks from the data context class all the students and returns them to the client. We go back to the view. We declare a string variable with the name output, and we have a for loop so that we will add at the end of the output variable the contents of the current student in an HTML format. First, we add a horizontal rule before every student so that it will be readable. After that, we display the student ID, the name, and the surname using a line break tag between them. When we finish with all the students, we set the contents of the LBL message div to be equal to the output variable. Let's run the application and visit the students action of the home controller. Let's see what happens when we click the Get Students button. We can see the list with the 2 students that we have in our database. Now let's see the code for the Get Student button, which gets the student from a specified student ID. The AJAX parameters are the same with one small difference. We have to add the student ID at the end of the URL, and we separate it from the rest of the URL using a slash character. we collected the student ID from the text box with the ID txt student ID. The success event is similar to the getStudent click event. We do not have a loop because we have only one student, and because there is a case that the student ID that we send to the client is the student ID that has been deleted, we have to check if the data is null. If it is null, then we have to display a message which will inform the user that there is not such a record. Let's run the application and visit the student's action of the home controller. If we leave the student ID to be equal to 1 and click the Get Student button, we will see the first student from the list. If we change the number to be equal to 2, then we get the second student. The problem is that if we change the number to be equal to 3 and click the button, an error will occur. This happens because there is not record ID equal to 3, because we have only 2 records. We checked if there is a null value in our JavaScript, but there is something else that we have to change in our controller. Let's go to the getStudent action of the student's API controller. The code that Visual Studio generated for us checks if the student is equal to null, and if it's equal to null, then it returns a not found result. We are going to change it by letting the application to return the null value. Let's comment the 3 lines with the null check and try to execute the application again and display the student's action of the home controller. Now, if we try to get the student with student ID equal to 3, a message will appear on the screen informing us about the problem. Now let's see the Add Student click event. First, we create an object with values for the properties of the student model. We do not include the student ID because the framework will generate it, so we just define the name and the surname of the student. Now we use the post request type, and this is enough for adding the student. In the success event, we take a copy of the new student where we can find the student ID that the database generated for us, and we display the information about the new student on the screen. Let's run the application and display the student's action of the home controller in order to see it in action. We click the Add Student button, and we will see that the new student added and the information about the new student appear on the screen. Let's click the Get Students button in order to get the entire list of students. The next click event is for the Update Student button. Initially, we create a student object and we set the properties to contain the new value for the student. We use the put request type, and we add at the end of the URL the student ID, which identifies the student who will be updated. In the success event, we inform the user that the student updated successfully. Let's run the application and display the student's action of the home controller in order to update the record. We click the Update Student button in order to update the record. Now we can click the Get Students button so that we will see that the student updated and the name of the first student instead of Aristotelis is Aris. Let's see the last button event, which is the Delete Student. Initially, we get the ID of the student that we want to delete and store it in the student ID variable. We use the delete request type, and we add the student ID at the end of the URL. Let's run the application and visit the student's action of the home controller in order to see it live. We type the student ID to be equal to 3 next to the delete student button, and we click the button, and the application will inform us about the student that deleted. Now let's click the Get Students button in order to see the list after the student deletion. We can see that the student with ID equal to 3 is missing. If we click again the Delete button, we will see that an error appears on the screen. Let's fix this problem by changing the Delete Student action of the student's API controller. We have the same problem as in the Get Student event. We try to delete a student who does not exist, and automatically generated code check if the student ID exists, and if it does not exist, then it sends a not found response. Instead of this, we will comment the check that already exists in the action, and we will make another check so that we will remove the student only when we do not have null value. Let's run again the application and visit the student's action of the home controller in order to see if we fix the problem. If now we try to delete a student who does not exist, a message will appear on the screen informing us about the problem.